I am your host of Across Generations, Tiffany D. Cross, and this is the only place where you will hear three different perspectives from three distinct generations of Black women, and I'm so thrilled to invite you to this conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany Cross, and I'm your host of Across Generations. All right, we have an exciting show coming up, and I want to start by saying how important Black fathers are in our lives. Now, listen, I am very aware that the media often gets it wrong and portrays this myth of the absentee Black father. And we know the data does not support this. A study supported by the Center for Disease Control, members of Congress, and the distinguished gentlemen of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated found that Black fathers are actually, regardless of marital or socioeconomic status, more involved in their children's lives than any other racial group. So for all the Black dads out there who are doing the damn thing, listen, brother, we salute you. So now that we've gotten that out of the way and acknowledged that, I do want to acknowledge that there is another side of this coin, and that is how those of us who grew up without fathers, for so many reasons, which we'll get into, we want to have that discussion. Now, for me personally, I was definitely a daddy's girl. My father treated me like a princess, but honey, Papa was a Rolling Stone. He and my mother were never married. They obviously stayed together long enough to produce me, and then it was over. And I really don't have a recollection of them being in a relationship. They had a relationship with each other, but they were not in a romantic relationship with each other. But my dad was always around. In fact, every Christmas Eve, he would sleep on our sofa so he could be there with me in the morning when I opened my gifts. He drove a motorcycle. He picked me up whenever I asked, and he kicked it hard. And he never told me I couldn't go. If my father were going to a cabaret, this is like an adult BYOB party, he'd take me right along with him, whether it was appropriate or not. He worked for the city of Cleveland in a variety of roles, paving streets and like driving big machines. He was hilarious. He was the life of the party, and he never had any judgment for anyone. He used to give, like, you know, those guys on the corner, he would give them liquor. Women on the corner, he would give them food. He was a great dad. But my father had a drinking problem. He drank a lot. Every single day. And while he created a loving environment for me, I really can't say that it was always appropriate. One of my earliest memories is sitting on my father's lap while he was in a cipher with his friends. And they told him, like, hey, man, maybe you should put your daughter to bed. And my dad said, my daughter ain't got to go nowhere. She want to sit right here on my lap. She's cool. And she's going to know everything about life. So when these knuckleheads come along and try to play her, she will be ready. And they were rolling the weed, and my dad asked, baby, tell him, what's this? And my little 5-year-old self said, a joint? I mean, this was my life. But the liquor had him in his grips. I remember him vomiting blood. He went in and out of the hospital until one day he went in and he didn't come out. He died of cirrhosis of the liver when I was 11 years old, and I feel that absence deeply now, just as I did then. So we talk a lot about daddy issues, and I want to invite you into this discussion. If you're so compelled, participate in the discussion as well in our comments. I do read them, but I think it's an important conversation to have, whether you have your father in your life or not, because we're going to talk about the relationship. So let's get into it. Dr. Joy Ellington is a mother of 3. She's 64. She's a divorcee who currently works in the healthcare field, assisting underprivileged persons obtain health insurance. She was born in Alabama, raised in California, and the relationship with her father was strained her entire life. And even though he was not present, she found herself constantly seeking his approval, even up until his death 2 years ago. We also have with us Ariel B. She's a 33-year-old medical coder and podcast host of This Too Shall Pass. She has never met her biological father and has spent many years searching for him. As a mother of 5, she finds it very difficult to relate to her children who seek a father figure due to her not feeling she really needed that growing up. She is currently, however, realizing how the absence of a father may have caused how she navigate her relationship with men as an adult, which I think is something we can all relate to. So I thank you, ladies, for being here.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited to have this conversation because, you know, when the two people in your life who are supposed to love you the most, your mother and your father, when those relationships are strained or go awry, it impacts how we live our entire lives as adults. So Dr. Joy, I will start with you. Tell me, what was the relationship with your father?
It was interesting in that my mother and father divorced when I was 1. So that's very early. And at that time, my mother and I moved to California. So I lived there for several years before my grandmother got sick. So my relationship with my father wasn't in existence. But then when I went back to Mobile, then we did have a relationship. He would come and pick me up every weekend, something similar to what you had with your father. But then when I moved back to California, then it began to be strained again, somewhat impacted by my stepmother. There was some conflict there. When I would go back to Mobile for visits, he was ever present. So it was like if we were in each other's company, there was a relationship. When I was out of sight, it was like I was out of mind. That was the strain that was there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, who was like responsible for, like, did he proactively call you and see you? Or as a child, were you adultized in a way where you were the one keeping that relationship alive?
I would say I was the one that was keeping that relationship alive while I was living in California.
I mean, it's hard to kind of comprehend that as a child, but how did that make you feel? That, I guess, did you feel like this relationship was not viable on its own if you were not the one keeping it alive? And if so, how did that make you feel?
That's very challenging. And the reason why I'm saying it's very challenging, many times when people go through a divorce, one of the parents or both parents often feed a lot of negativity into the relationship, speaking about one parent versus another. But my mother didn't do that. My mother was very kind in that whatever your father is, he will reveal it. And so that was always the message in the back of my head, that I'm going to see who you are, who I am to you, and who you are to me. You will demonstrate that. So building that relationship or continuously making the conversation, that was frustrating because I felt that he should have. However, I had another savior, per se, and that was my stepfather. So he stepped into the role. So I didn't feel abandoned. I had some issues of abandonment of why not me? But looking at the dynamics of his relationship with his wife and my brothers, that was different.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Your stepfather stepped in and loved you appropriately, like he was present in your life?
Oh, by far, still is today.
I feel like sometimes as mothers, we remarry hoping that void gets filled. Did that fill the void of your father being absent or no?
Oh, definitely. Okay. Because he loved me. I'll give you a story. And this is very funny. I wanted to go to a dance that was taking place at a club. And my mother said, definitely you can't go. And I said, I know what to do. I'll go to my stepfather and I'll ask him. And he told me, he said, no, you can't go. And I was so angry and I was so hurt. I began to cry. And he just held me and said, baby, that's just not the place for you to go.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust them. So he stepped in a different manner.
Right.
Or he stepped in as that father figure to secure me of understanding it wasn't just a no. It was, I'm protecting you for the rest of your life.
How old were you?
Oh, 14?
Oh,
okay.
A teenager.
Okay. Yes.
That's why I think it's so important to acknowledge that, yes, Black men are present in our lives, whether they're biological father or not.
Right.
There are fathers who are out there doing great things. And I hate this narrative of this like absentee Black father, because they do exist. But I'm happy that you brought this up because your fatherhood story is different, I think, from Dr. Joy. So tell me your relationship with your father and your story.
Okay, so I have a mother and a father. And until I was like 26, 27, my understanding of them being my parents was that they were my parents. I didn't find out till I was 26 that I was adopted. So
neither of your parents are your biological parents?
Neither one. Neither one of them. But growing up, I did not know that. I was adopted by Black people. I think it'd be different if I was like in an Asian household or like everyone was Caucasian. They were not.
Yeah.
And I remember my mother always said, Jesus makes everyone different. And when you were in a big Black family, there are different shades of Black. So it wasn't uncommon. Some of my cousins have the same mother and father, and there is one that's lighter skin complexion and one that's not.
Yeah.
So I didn't look around and say anything. We were all African American, everyone. So I did not question it ever. I wasn't loved wrong. I wasn't I didn't spend like the first 5 years in foster care. I was adopted from birth. So within 48 hours, I was there in their custody. So it wasn't until I got to be 26, 27 that I figured out that they were not my biological parents.
How did that feel at 26, 27, to have your entire world disrupted, you know?
I kind of felt like the family secret. I felt like someone or something along the way thought that I wasn't capable of understanding that information. I felt like I was belittled or maybe thought to not be able to understand, kind of like it's too much for her. By then, 26, 27, I was married. I had 4 kids. That means every single time I gave birth or went to the doctor, I checked out health information that had nothing to do with me. And everyone thought that was appropriate. So I think that's where I kind of felt slighted. I felt like someone should have stepped in and said something, even for the health of me or my kids. Anything could have happened, and no one thought it was appropriate to say anything to me.
I didn't even think about the health aspect of it.
Yes, but I think that it was depending on the time.
Yes.
I have a brother that's the same. He was unaware that my stepfather was not his father because my stepfather came on board when he was 1.
Right.
That's the only daddy that he's ever known. And when that happened, when it was revealed that he felt slighted, such as yourself. I don't know what that feels like. For me, watching the dynamics of family, I think that motherhood, fatherhood is all who really stepped to the plate to perform.
Right.
I do understand the biological part because we want to know what the truth is.
Right.
But even with knowing the truth to me is who really stepped up to the plate.
Right.
That's my feelings about it.
Right.
Well, how was your adoptive parents? Did you feel connected to them? Did you have a good childhood?
I felt connected. I can never say that I wasn't loved or provided for or protected. I grew up very well. I went to good schools. I was in a good neighborhood. I went to the best summer camps. I think I was fine. And I think that's why a part of me always felt guilty looking for my biological family because I wasn't raised bad. I feel like sometimes people only think you deserve to look, you deserve to know if you grew up in foster care or if you were abused but I genuinely, out of curiosity, wanted to know who I was, the facets of me. But my parents were great.
So your adoptive father, you did have a relationship with him?
Yes, they raised me from birth.
Okay. But I mean, you had a good relationship, a healthy relationship with him. So then how does not having, or I guess does not having or knowing even who your biological father is that a challenge for you? And if so, how does that challenge show up in your everyday life?
It's a challenge for me only because I do not today currently know a name, a face, a age, anything of my biological father. But meeting the woman that birthed me.
So you did meet your biological mother. Tell us about that.
There was a lot of me in her. I saw a lot of the facets of nature versus nurture in that woman. Things that I could not connect with on my biological side that I said as a child. There's home videos of me saying as a kid, I don't think I'm from here. I was 4. There was no reason why I should say that out loud. And it was a lot of my family, like I said, everyone in my family is great. Aunts, uncles, everyone. Married, no issues, all kids from the same household. When I found my biological mother, she's one of a lot. I'm not gonna lie and say that I have all the details. It's more than 8. And I figured out that there's not one woman that's married. Every woman has multiple children with different fathers. The facets of, domestic violence or divorce is high. I felt like I carried something genetic that wasn't seen in the home that I was growing up in. But I saw a lot of the facets that I think in my adopted household were seen as unruly or rebellious or loud-spoken or sexually inquisitive at an early age was there in that biological family's household. And it was so normal that I was able, it was like a sheep shedding its skin. Like I'd never been looked at in so understood than when I sat in that lady's house.
That raises the question of nature versus nurture. Did you ask her about your father?
I did.
And what'd she say?
Now, when I found out I was adopted, it was not in the best circumstances. It was told to me by mistake. To this day, currently, I was never supposed to know. It's in a safety security deposit box downtown. If my parents were to pass or pass together, that box is to be destroyed. I was never supposed to know that was the intent. With time, my father told me, how do you ever tell the child you prayed for and that you love that she's not yours? Mm-hmm. When do I sit you down and look you in the face and tell you you're not mine? He's like, I never thought about it again. Once I signed that paper and I raised you, it never crossed my mind again. You were mine, I was yours, and life went on. I found my biological mother on Facebook. It's a wonderful network where you put in people's first and last names, not like Instagram where people change their hashtags. So I found her on there, and all I had was a safety deposit box of pictures of children, because I'm a product of 2 teenage children. Same way my child was a product of 2 teenage children. But no one in my adopted family had ever had teenage pregnancy, ever. So yeah, I only had a picture of a young girl, 10th grade, and a young boy, 10th grade. But I'm looking for them 27 years later with a childhood school OCPS picture. I did find the gentleman online the same way I found my biological mother through Facebook. He told me that he carried the shame of me for a long time, that giving me up for adoption, his family at that time actually had to move because, you were supposed to raise the kids you birth and they chose a different option. So he said, no disrespect to you, but I'd like to get a DNA test. I've never known. I knew she birthed a child. I knew you didn't stay, but I don't know. And I was in 10th grade, and this is a grown man now. So who am I to say, oh, no, just love me for who No, I need to know too. I was just as lost as he was. We went to, there's a DNA center in Orlando, Florida. He said, I'll pay for your test and I'll pay for mine. He paid for himself and he went first. That day that he went, I had to work. So I went the next day, checked myself in. I asked if my test was already paid for. The lady at the clerk desk confirmed that it was. I sat down and I let them swab me, and I sat there. And then in 2 weeks, I got an email and none of our genes matched.
So he was not your biological father?
No.
Wow. So we still don't know who your biological father is. Did you go back and confront your mother with this info?
The only thing is it's hard to confront someone I don't have relationship with, like long term. It's hard for me to push. I feel like I can push my mother that raised me because I'm like, well, we were raised with good standards. Isn't honesty the best policy? It's hard for me to lay who I am on someone, even though I know she loved me and I know she looked for me and it was a teenage pregnancy. It's hard for me to push her. She was very adamant that that's the only person I slept with in 10th grade. She had no other answers. And I thought it was always a little weird, a little eerie. I did do the whole genetics thing that's online with the apps, the DNA and me, DNA and whatever. And it says that I'm related to a lot of people with a last name that is in her family. So I kind of stopped.
You're related to a lot of people in her family.
The last name is similar to a lot of people that are related on like her stepdad's side of the family. So that made me pause. I didn't know if I was going to make her relive something. I didn't know if this was a stepfather, a stepbrother, and I let it go for the mental health of a woman that I felt like at that time had changed her life and was doing good for herself. And she was happy with just finding me, and I kind of just left it. It was weird. I always thought it was a little eerie. The last names do match. Like, they'll say this genetics of your DNA is related to people, and it'll say mother's side. And mother's side has all the last names of her side. Then it'll say father's last name, let's just throw out Johnson. But that Johnson side, let's say, is just from the stepfather's side. So that gave me pause. And
so
I didn't
possibly incestuous
it
relations?
could have been a child was touched. And I just didn't want to.
So it's possible that you are the product of sexual abuse.
Correct.
And potentially incestuous sexual abuse through a stepfather.
Correct.
That is a lot to carry as somebody. Correct. How, knowing that, how did that show up in you're finding this out at 26 or 27, Ariel.
Going through a divorce, it was just hard. I just felt like I never got a yes or no answer, and I don't even know if that is correct, but I didn't want to peel back trauma for someone who I was taken from her. Her mother said absolutely not. I have 7 kids. I'm struggling to feed these 7. You will birth her, because that was their faith and their religion, but she will not stay here. So she had that trauma. She had a lot of me being taken from her. They said, oh, we're just going to go check her vitals. And I never went back to her room.
Oof.
This was a 10th grader.
Yes.
So I just didn't want to tear her down, because I feel like no matter what she went through for me to get there, I lived a good life. And a part of me just wanted to be grateful for that.
Now, you brought up something. I'm going to step back a little bit, because I've gone through that this year.
Yeah.
And it's interesting where you have daddy issues past their death. My father passed 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But my
I'm sorry for that.
stepmother required a DNA test.
2 years ago?
I had to take it this year.
What?
I'm 64 years old.
You went and got swabbed down at 60.
At
Why?
64.
Why did she want that?
Why?
Because
Was there inheritance?
Not that I know of. She said that she needed that for peace of mind.
She did not believe that you were
Correct.
And is that what led to the challenging relationship? You know, the distance that you guys had with each other.
I think that is part of it. I think that is part of it.
How long was she married to your father?
Oh, over 50 some years.
Okay, so she was there for a good.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
She came on board when I was about 8 years old.
Oh yeah, no, that's young. Yeah.
So knowing all the dynamics, but talking about daddy issues.
Right.
So when there is absenteeism, you need to kind of roll things back to evaluate
Yes.
why is there absenteeism. And for me, I believe that his engagement when I was present, of being he was very present, but when I was out of sight, out of mind, had some to do with the dynamics of his household.
Okay.
It wasn't just totally reliant upon him. So when we talk about daddy issues, it is rolling back. What are all of the factors that could contribute to that? And for me, thinking about this at 64, past my father's passing, my biological father, now you're being required to take a DNA test. That's very revealing of much.
Can I ask you if you took it?
I did.
You did?
I wasn't going to.
Okay.
Well, let me say it. I wasn't going to, then I was going to, then I wasn't going to again. And it was primarily because my stepmother and my stepmother literally cursed me out about an issue. And
Recently?
And because of that, I said, okay, I'm not going to take the test.
Right.
But then from my stepmother and my father's relationship, I have 2 brothers. And one of the brothers asked me if I would take the test. And because of him, I said I would. Because to me, my role in life is to be who I am.
Yeah.
I'm the daughter, I'm the sister, and if there's something that I should do, I will. The same way as it was, I was going to take the test for my stepmother. But then once you curse me out for no reason, okay, I have no reason to really oblige you.
Yeah.
Right. So,
You know, it's interesting because first of all, I'm sorry that you had this experience with your stepmother. My father was never married to my mother. Like I said, they stayed along to make me and that was it. But my father did eventually marry a woman when I was like 5 years old. Okay. My stepmother, Sharon, and we got along great. I mean, I was a brat, don't get me wrong, because my father let me do whatever. Like she'd be trying to play Susie Q homemaker and make these meals because they didn't have kids yet. And she'd have a balanced meal with vegetables. And I'm like, I don't want it, And my dad like, okay, cool, we'll go get pizza, And she was trying to bring order. Right. I remember when I was little, when the song We Are the World came out, that was like my favorite song, okay? I had the little 45. For the young people who don't know, that's a little tiny album. It looked like a CD. Y'all might not even know what a CD is anymore at this point. But I used to put this album on. And we had a closet that you stepped up in, and I would hide behind her clothes. And soon as that first stanza came out, and I would just move her clothes.
Yes, I remember it.
You can tell I was a little star. Yes.
Give me a
and
good
she
performance.
said to my father, she's like, Bronson, she's like in the closet, like messing up my clothes. And my dad's like, oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And moved all her clothes to a different closet.
So that you can carry on
so I
with
just keep my stage singing We Are the World. And she still found it in herself to love me, take care of me. I mean, he would let me eat whatever. I would get sick and she would come clean it up and everything. So I was blessed to have that relationship with her, which I think helped me have a good relationship with my father.
Yes.
But to have that relationship disrupted with his untimely death at a point. And I remember the night that my father, the last time I saw him conscious, he said to me, he's like, I'm dying. And he was vomiting blood. And I mean, just, it was awful. And I knew I just didn't want to be there. I didn't want to see it. You know, I wanted to leave. And so I left, and the next morning, the ambulance was there carrying him out. We went to the hospital. And so a part of me wonders, like, I wonder had I stayed in the house with my dad. I didn't. At this point, he was living with another woman who wasn't my stepmother. But I was like, I wonder if I stayed in that house with him that night, what he may have said to me. You know, would he have imparted some dying wisdom on me, or would I have been traumatized by what I saw? I don't know. But I think the commonality of all of us, even though you were blessed enough to have your adoptive father raise you, you're blessed enough to have a stepdad come in your life. So again, shout out to Black dads. I think the commonality, though, is there was our biological fathers were not around for a point in our life. And I just wonder how that has impacted our relationships with our peers, with our lovers, but most importantly with ourselves. And I would say for me, I definitely had when I was younger, I always wanted to date older men. I don't mean like inappropriate, like I was a teenager dating adults. I mean like in my 20s, most of the men I dated were in their 30s.
Okay.
I definitely liked men who, you know, were kind of in charge, you know, like very similar characteristics to my dad. And I'll tell you guys, I'm telling all my business, and I'm like sharing my therapy session. But I remember I was talking to my therapist, had me write down what characteristics I would like in a parent at different points in my life. I recommend people do that. It was really illuminating because I wrote about what kind of characteristics I want as a toddler, you know, as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, as a 13-year-old, as a 16-year-old. And I wrote all these down, and I was dating this man. And months prior, she had asked me, why do you like this man? You know, and I wrote down all the things I liked about him. And she said to me, Tiffany, the things that you wished you had in a parent, you reference them as things you like in this man. And she said to me, you are looking for a parent, not a partner. And a partner cannot be your parent. And I, at this big age, am still struggling with that because it's so caught up in who I am. So I said all my business to say, how has the relationship with your father impacted the relationship that you have with our counterparts, Black men, in your relationships with men?
I like the question. It was very impactful for me in regards to my marriage. I feel that men have a very special place in their children's life. I think they're very important, of course, to the partnership between the adults. But when I married my husband, it was a little sketchy. And I'm saying sketchy because we were slated to get married. Then I did what I shouldn't have done, and then I got pregnant. So then I moved the wedding up.
Yes.
Let's speed this up.
Yes.
Take time.
So some would possibly call it a shotgun wedding, but it wasn't.
But y'all were already slated
we were already slated to be married. But because I moved the wedding date up, then his heart began to falter. I'm talking about my ex-husband. But we were married for almost 25 years. Out of that, I would not have stayed the entire time. He was not abusive. The best partner for my children I could ever have.
Okay.
For me, he didn't love me. He liked me a lot, but he didn't love me. He loves me now, but I'm not his wife.
Right. Would he say he loved you?
Oh, yeah. I'll use his words. I love you, but I'm not in love with you.
Yeah.
So.
And you felt that?
It equals the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Were you in love with him?
Yes and no. I think I was more so in love with the fact of keeping my family together.
Yes.
I wanted my children, and that was why we stayed. But mind you, talking about fathers, my children loved their father. He filled a gap that needed to be filled.
Yes.
It was a promise that I made to myself. There were a couple of promises. One was I'll never just have one child, because I stayed the only child for 11 years. That's a lonely life, you know.
Oh, that makes me feel good.
You have 5, so they will not be lonely.
And then not only was that was the first one, and the second one was I was going to fight to keep my family together for my children's sake. So, you know, there's a scripture that says there's no greater love than the love where you lay down your life for a friend. Well, my children, for me, were my friend.
Yeah.
So I would sacrifice me, similar to some things that you may be familiar with, you know. Was it the right thing to do? Would I do it again? Definitely. Because
really?
Definitely.
You wouldn't change a thing?
I would not.
Oh, wow.
When I look at my children, they're who they are and how they are. I would not change it. Give it. Our home was very peaceful. If you ask my children, what would they call it? It was just a wholesome place. Everyone came to our home.
I love that.
My children went into shock along with me when we went for a divorce, because we never displayed. My children never saw us argue. We would have deep conversations, but that was still behind closed doors. So it was not a lot of turmoil that went on in our house. My ex-husband, I love him. I still love him to this day because he is a very good person.
Yes.
When did you know when you got married to him that he didn't love you? Or that he was not in love with you?
No, not really. During our wedding, it was a very exciting time for he and I. And I'll say it this way. I showed up expecting him not to show up. He showed up expecting me not to show up.
Oh, wow.
We both shocked each other.
Right, yeah.
That was one. 2 was the fact, while the minister was actually doing our vows, we were kind of arguing here, right in front, but not it
wasn't
bitter,
vitriolic,
right. It wasn't a bitter argument, but it was an argument of, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? You know, really? And that kind of friendship that we still hold.
Well, I think that's beautiful. I think there's something there, though, to be with somebody who wasn't in love with you. And the through line of the relationship, the distance you had with your biological father, because that is the first relationship that we have with a member of the opposite sex, and it determines so much. How do you think... Well, I mean, you kind of found out when you were already an adult, but just how did the relationship with your adoptive father, who was there for you and supportive, and then finding out you don't know who your biological father is, how has that impacted your choice in partnership?
I can say that a lot of people look at daddy issues as an issue. An issue is a bad thing. An issue is something you should seek help for, talk to a therapist for. You're the problem. Until you get that little kink worked out, it'll always be you.
Yeah.
I need people to know that daddy issues can come from healthy father-daughter relationships.
Absolutely.
It was healthy. It was so healthy to the fact that when my husband didn't do shit, I called my dad.
Yeah.
And my dad came over and I sat down and my dad would fix everything. To the point that sometimes I didn't even lean on my husband probably the way I should have, because how I was grown and raised and fed. And if I have a problem, you call your dad. And my husband's at work. The toilet is broken now. My dad's at home. I'm going to call my dad. I won't even fill him in sometimes. Or sometimes, like you brought up, I really resonated when you said you and your husband didn't argue in front of your kids. And if you had serious or in-depth or needed conversation, it was done behind closed doors. That is me to a picture. I have never, to this day at 33, ever seen my parents argue. Ever. So when I experienced it in my marriage, I was like, oh my God, I have to fix this. It's me. This never happened to my parents. They never argued. They did. I just didn't see it. But because I didn't see it, people think ignorance is bliss, and it's not. If I would have maybe seen my parents argue in front of me and handle it in an appropriate way with positive language and not calling each other out of their name, maybe I wouldn't have developed the fix it mentality. Like, I have to be a better wife. My mother has to be a better wife than me, because she didn't pull my father out of character like this, but she did.
Right.
It was just behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So I didn't see it.
I think that's so key what you said, because I do think a lot of parents and what you consider healthy relationships, right? It's like, let's take this, but it's okay to see conflict.
It's okay because
you want to see conflict resolution.
Yes.
How
because conflict
do you change?
is normal.
Yeah.
It is normal.
That's
so how do I handle it as a wife? And I never saw it. I might as well have not had a mom and a dad. There were facets of a marriage, even though I was a product in their house and raised and loved and appropriately, I never saw it.
But this is the thing. It wasn't that I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
My husband didn't want to argue.
It was my dad too. My dad did not want to show us that at all.
Exactly. I felt that it should always be. Now I'll take you another step or into a different layer. And this layer is, after we moved to California and then we moved back because my grandmother became sick, lived with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents. But my grandfather was an alcoholic. But he was a gentle alcoholic.
Yep.
Same with my dad.
Same with my dad.
Yeah.
He and my grandmother would argue all the time in the bed.
Yeah.
So I saw that. So it didn't bother me, going back to what you're saying about having that actually exhibited in front of you, what that really means. And what it meant to me was, you can have the argument and good night, baby, good night, or no good nights in the morning, because I saw my grandmother get up in the morning and make his breakfast, and they may have argued half the night. Yeah. But they're in the bed together. Yeah. So the conflict resolution, how do you do that? You stay in there.
Right.
Yeah. That was the other reason why I felt that I could do it all over again. Same. Because I saw that. It was not an issue.
You know, it makes me think about, I'll transition just a little bit to sex.
Okay.
Well, because I think, you know, as a young woman, and, you know, my father passed away and I had to go through my teenage years. And I remember my father, like I said, my father was from around the way, but a cool, like, everybody loved my dad. Right. He was the life of the party, but he certainly did raise me a certain way, to conduct myself a certain way. I was untouchable. I was this princess, you know, and I was only to be touched by like the most high quality person who could ever. And so I did go through life. And I never, even at this middle age, I have never separated sex and love. And so I wonder if it's that I've never separated sex and love, or do I equate sex with love? Like, do I want this connection so badly that I convince myself, maybe I love you, and have this relationship that I'm really yearning for, since my therapist told me you're looking for a parent, not a partner. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I'm really searching for something deeper. I haven't quite worked that out in my mind yet. Y'all are my therapists for free this time. But I wonder how, even in our physical relationships with our counterparts, like, I've never been able to do like a casual sex relationship, you know, because I think about, my father's been gone, you know, in the arms of Jesus, some would say, for, you know, over 35 years. But I do think about, like, him watching me, and like men I deal with, I'm like, will my father be good with me rocking with you? You know, like, are you the kind of man who my father will be proud to hand over his daughter to? And it makes me question myself sometimes with these men. How does it show up for you? Like, when you deal with men, what is your thought process as it relates to your dad?
I think when you get that princess treatment, it is hard to separate sex from love, for me. Very similar to what you said. I would be a terrible prostitute.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
And some people are like, oh, it's a tool. It's not to me.
No.
It's not a tool. I don't think it's a game. Everyone I've ever slept with, I loved them.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be this forever thing. I equate sex with love. I definitely equate children with love. Like, it was, my dad didn't leave.
Yeah.
So why would you leave? And I buried your children and you're still gonna leave. Like, it was like a shock. Like, it was something I really had to work through. And sex goes both ways. If a man thinks that sex is not equivalent to love, which I sadly have figured that out, it doesn't matter how I feel. I know that I struggle separating sex with love very bad. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I probably will never. I have girlfriends all the time that are just like, oh, what do they say? Knock the dust off. Just do it for a couple of, that sounds terrible.
Yes.
That sounds horrific. That sounds
It doesn't sound
insensitive.
terrible in the sense of I'm judging women.
Right.
I'm actually a little envious that you can own your sexuality that way.
And just use it when you want to.
Right. Or like you're not trying to resolve some daddy issue maybe. Like maybe you just have agency over your sexuality and this is what you like to do. Yeah. For me, it is definitely very caught up in the relationship I had with my father and being the kind of woman that he would be proud of today, just as he was then, but also just this innate value that he taught me.
More than anyone else.
Because he taught me, like my father, I'm telling you, I would be at very adult environments sitting right on my dad's lap. They passing the weed around and I'm sitting right there. And my father was like, you can't even come speak to my daughter in a certain way. You had to afford me respect from protection. Birth. Even my uncles.
I'm proud of you all.
Oh, well, thank you. Because you know I'm about to ask you, Dr. Joy.
Tell me how you get down,
and I was
Dr.
facing
Joy.
this camera right here.
How you get down.
Yes, Dr. Joy. Tell as our seasoned elder, like what role, like how do you conflate the relationships you have with men sexually with the kind of absentee father that you had?
I do not.
It's completely separate for you.
I understand the integration. I do believe in love and sex and how they really this is I have to take a breath there because I remember loving my husband so much. This is really bad.
Give it to me. Yes, please.
We're seeing her. Do it. I know I was, but it was. But I really just wanted to melt into his body.
Yes.
That was the love. That was just how deep it was for me. However, there's the flip side because I can separate the two where you may not be able to separate the two. I can.
I'm working on it.
I grew up in a family with many men. I had a great aunt that had 7 sons. And I lived my life with them. So I learned the male role and their conversation. And it really made me more masculine in my thinking and feelings than feminine. It's hard for me to cry.
Wow.
I don't mind. But it's very challenging for me to cry.
Oh, wow.
I could cry right now,
Instantly.
probably. Yeah.
I'm not that sensitive.
Yeah.
But at the same token, boy, I have some stories.
Were your emotions tolerated?
What's that story?
Was your emotions tolerated as a child? When you cried, did someone tell you to be quiet? You're doing too much? Suck it up?
No.
But it was just hanging around 7 boy cousins made you not cry.
Oh, because I was never going to be that beggy woman. I don't need you.
But
I may
but that's the
want
boy
you,
cousins.
but I don't need you.
Well, okay, so you're talking about the boy cousins. What I'm hearing is your father was not there consistently, and that you learned to self-soothe and say, you know what, my father, I am the person maintaining this relationship is not viable without me. So I will teach myself I don't need you. But in our biological way that we're connected to our parents, being the loins of their fruit.
Is she trying to tell me something? No,
ma'am, I would never.
We are all flawed.
No. I'm going into your wisdom. But this is what I'm hearing as an outsider is that you self-soothe and taught yourself, I'm a G. You know, and I am going to
love me, somebody else will.
But also I'm going to take control of this relationship. I will force you to see me. I will maintain this relationship in your life, whether you're maintaining it or not. I will defiantly be your daughter, despite you allowing your wife, your stepmother, to be in this. And I draw the through line. It's not so much the boy cousins. It's this is what I learned through the relationship with my father and how I relate to others, but again, how I relate to myself. I will not allow myself to feel this pain
weak
because I'm going to self-soothe.
And it's not really the weakness. It's more so I am very viable, just as you are, but I'm not going to be dependent on you validating me. I must validate myself. Now, if you validate me too, we really have something going on. But if you don't, I am not going, because normally what happens when people are seeking that validation from someone else, be it from a father or whoever,
Right.
you're weakened. You've given the control of
So
your
true.
life to someone else.
Yeah.
To their discretion.
To their discretion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can't afford to do that because I only have this one life. I only have this 1 second. I only have this one day. With all of that being said, I'm going to validate me. Now, that does not mean I don't have a yearning or a desire. I do, but I do not let the desire dictate my feelings.
I think that's so beautiful because you can go through you not having a present father biological in your household every day. And that's that split where it's like it can either go this way or it can either go this way. Not saying that how you process or how we process things is 100% correct, but I just think that piece that she took, like, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to love me. And if you're around, you're around. And if you're not, you're not. I still think there's a lot of strength in that.
Yeah.
Because some people can just be like, well, if my daddy doesn't love me, no one loves me. And then you hear that on the flip side for some people that are, prostitutes or got raped or different circumstances because you are seeking that validation, but you took it the opposite way and made it beautiful for you. And I think
it's wisdom in that. This is why I so love hearing from our elders. You're in your 60s and life has taught you that. And I will walk away with that, with knowledge.
That was beautiful.
Because what you're saying is to the extreme, Ariel. You're saying, prostitutes and what they go through. I am nowhere near that, but I still have sought validation on some level where it may not be pronounced. I mean, I am on the journey home to myself. In my 20s, I did not have the discernment to understand what I was doing. But even now, in dealing with this man, and it's like I'm drawn back to what my father taught me. Like, make sure that you are valued. And he didn't say these words to me, he just showed me these words. My uncles is what I got to give because when my father passed away, my uncle Brady used to take me to dinner for every single birthday. And he had this cute little black 2-seater sports car, and I would get dressed up and we would go to dinner. My dad used to say, ask your Uncle Brady if your daddy could come. It was his older brother. And it was always just me and him. And I just felt like courted, I felt like so special. He took me to some adult dinner, and it was like a black tie dinner, and I went with him, and I would just hear adults speak. And I remember being a little girl at the table, and I had only heard this in movies. I didn't even know what it meant, but I knew I was thirsty. And I said, excuse me, everyone, I'm going to get a drink. And everybody laughed, because of course, like, that's like alcohol. But I remember just now what I'm going through dealing with this man in therapy and just, trying to figure life out. My therapist pointed out that some people, it's like if you can convince this man to love you in the way that you want to be loved. For example, if he's like loves you but not in love with you, or if he's in love with you but not good for you, whatever that is, that you can convince this man to love me and be in love with me the way that I desire, then somehow that would make everything else make sense. Then somehow you are showing yourself I am worthy. So all the other people who didn't love me before, my mother, my father, my parents loved me, but as a child, you misinterpret things. My mom didn't make me feel away. My dad didn't make me feel away. Whatever that is, and this person loving me, I will heal those wounds. And that's not how it goes. So your thought that, no, I validate myself. I am self-soothing. I'm managing my emotions. I have not managed those things yet. I'm managing them, but I'm certainly I am not where you have attained this wisdom. And nothing is like days spent on this earth. So I think that helps you afford this wisdom of coming home to yourself. So speaking of coming home to ourselves, we got to come home and pay some bills real quick. So we're going to take a quick break. But on the other side of this, I do want to get into just what some of the streets are talking about when it comes to, these like celebrities and, we romanticize their lives, but they also have challenges with their kids. And anyway, I'm just tired of telling all my business. So we're going to talk about some other people and their business right after this break. So stay with us. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We have not stopped talking for 2 seconds because we have so much to talk about. But now that I told all my business, I'd like to get into somebody else's business. And that is Brian McKnight. Before we went to break, I was going to ask you guys what makes a bad dad. And sadly, Brian McKnight comes to mind. Just for our viewers who don't know, Brian McKnight has, I feel, disrespected, disregarded, and discarded his children from his first marriage, unfortunately. He has referred to his children as a product of sin. He recently accused his ex-wife of basically influencing his relationship with his now estranged son. And his son, I should tell you, has cancer. And his son, Nico, tweeted, "When I was about to die in the hospital from complications from my cancer, I just wanted to bury the hatchet and hear from him," referring to Brian McKnight, "hear from him say he loves me. And he told me no, he could not arbitrarily tell me he loves me. Still cuts so deep." The fact that this is playing out in social media, I think, is just heartbreaking. But also it makes you question what kind of man with means and resources would treat their children that way. But it struck me with you, Dr. Joy, because your stepmother influenced your relationship with your father. And so you have a unique lens into this. And I'm curious what you might say to Brian McKnight, having been the product of a relationship like that. What would you say to him?
I would begin with, he really need to evaluate why he want to erase that part of his life or rearrange it. Why would you call it sin if you were married to the woman, the mother of your children?
Right.
How is it now they were born of sin? Are you really speaking of yourself? Are you speaking of the relationship? There are so many layers to that. But looking at my stepmother, she made a comment. This was during the time of the burial of my grandmother, my father's mother. And my grandmother had been sick and they had to take care of her. And she made the comment, she said, "You know, I've had a problem with you because you ruined my perfect man." Now, given I was in my 20s when she told me this, but this was feelings that she had from my age of 8, that I ruined her perfect man. How does a child ruin this?
I'm so ignorant.
Well, it's ignorant, but it says a whole lot more.
Yes.
Because what's at the root of that is I have an idea in my mind of what it's supposed to look like, what my life is supposed to look like. So when I think of Brian McKnight, I think of the same thing, that he's saying you were born in sin, so I want to erase that part of my life. And this is my now life. Now, does that make it right? No. I think he's very confused.
And self-hating, like, because we had Dionne Warwick on the show and she talked about why would you want to disrespect your creation? Right. This person is a part of you. And I mean, look, I will say I will preserve everybody's privacy, but I will say I happen to know Brian McKnight is an asshole, you know, from firsthand experience. Wow. So I think, so I forgive my language, Dr. Joy, but I don't find him to be, this is very compelling at all as just a person who would treat his children that way. But I'm curious your thoughts on, you know, the way Brian McKnight is like just publicly disregarding his children in favor of this, because sometimes it is like a new relationship is the thing that's influencing your relationship with your children, and both people have to come together. I thought Jada did a great job with this with Will Smith's ex-wife, that they said we had to put our differences aside and put the kids first. This doesn't even seem like that. This seems like Brian McKnight is like, I don't like your mama, so I don't like you. And that is just not a fair thing. What are your thoughts?
I think it's terrible. I feel bad for whatever way the kids are gonna have to process through life, how they're gonna carry and process it. You never know how someone can internalize that. And I think that's important to shed light on. I probably resonate more, or my kids, so I would say because I raised my kids, would probably resonate more with the son. And that's hard. And I don't think that, I think it makes it worse that Brian McKnight has a large platform, which means he has the way to reach the masses, whether it's good or bad.
He's in the position of power.
Right. But there are fathers that have no power, disregard their kids every day on a regular relationship. And I wonder, you know, the kids are gonna have to heal from this publicly, emotionally, at home. I just don't know.
Well, I am struck
how to fix that.
Well, he is suggesting, and I do find this a bit striking, that it's like, oh no, but the mother rejected my help. Now, let's just take Brian McKnight out of it.
Okay.
Who we've established is an asshole.
Correct.
So let's just talk about the dynamic when the mother is the person denying the father access to the children, and the father like making every effort and then being resentful because it's like, well, I can't feel this pain of not having my children. I'm mad at the mom, so I don't have anything to do with it.
I need fathers to put their foot down and fight for their rights for their kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm tired of the lazy fatherhood approach. If these are their kids and you love your kids, go to the courthouse. There's one in every county in the United States. If you love that kid and you want to see that kid, get your weekends.
Yeah.
I don't care if they call you a weekend dad. You only get Friday through Sunday. Make your imprint on that child's life if you want to. But just crying about how much you want to be a dad at home or just for the 50 followers you have on Instagram is not enough.
Yes.
It's not
Thank you.
enough.
Yeah.
If you are a good father, the courts will give you rights to your kids.
Yeah.
But if you can't get off your ass and go down there and pay $25 to register for visitation for your kid, shame on you.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the mother, and it's nothing to do with the child. Sometimes fathers take that's an easy cut. Oh, it's the mother. It's the mother. No, honey, it's you.
Yeah.
Because there wouldn't be a day in hell that I wouldn't fight to see my kids.
Yeah.
I don't care how much money I'd have to pay on the line to go see my kids, and it's free. Visitation is completely separate from child support.
Yeah.
A lot of men like to say, oh, they overlap. I don't pay my child support. I can't see them. There's not one state where that overlaps. Not paying your child support does not negate you visitation rights to your kids.
Yeah. 100%.
It hurts the mother because I feel like you should financially help pay for soccer. But just because you don't does not mean that I don't let you see your kid Friday through Saturday.
But you are a special mother. There are some mothers who really use their children as weapons.
Yeah.
And that does hurt
Yes.
the children.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. And I think that's what we're talking about. But I don't know.
Well, I think what your point though is taken to put kids first. You know, your father had an obligation to you, regardless of what your stepmother was doing, to put you first. And I go ahead.
And I agree with that. But I'm going to go way back just a little bit. And that is where you were talking about how you saw the dynamics of some of your characteristics, behaviors.
Correct.
Okay.
What was he shown? Who is he?
Right. For me, I have many characteristics of my father, even though I wasn't raised in the house with him. And it is conflict avoidance. It's one. And with that was also his role. So do I really hold him guilty? Because for him, he was trying to minimize the conflict in the home that he was in. When it comes to adults, an adult is an adult and a child is a child. I want to have the parents to perform correctly or properly or the way that I want them to feel. But if the dynamics does not provide for that, what do I do? Do I leave my now home for the one? I wouldn't have wanted that either, because that would not have been the right way when you can't put the one first, because we're always doing trade-offs. It's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can make the compromise, but sometimes you can't. If you selected a partner who really is not on board. Now, one of the things that my mother did when she married my stepfather, she told him, I come as a package deal.
Yep. Amen.
If you do not accept my full package,
You don't accept me.
you don't accept me.
Absolutely.
That's different.
Yeah.
Everyone do not put that
on Front Street.
Yeah.
make that a part of the deal.
Yeah.
They do not propose that.
Yeah.
They go for, okay, I want you, you want me, we'll
Yeah.
get married, and then we'll work everything out on the back end. No, you need to actually have that on the front end.
And even, but I think to just go a step deeper, our community You know, like this is credo in the Black community.
Yes.
There is no child who is just somebody's child. A Black child is everybody's child.
Neighbors.
If I see a kid walking down the street and it's cold and they ain't got a hat on, I'm like, that baby need a hat on. You know, like my grandmother, every child was hers. You know, every child, you had a right to gather the parents if they weren't doing something right. On the playgrounds, Black parents, everybody, every Black child on there is their responsibility. So it's just striking to me to see this man publicly discard his children. It's just so unfortunate. But I think to your point, though, Dr. Joy, put the kids first. That's what it's about. And I think what you're saying. And listen, Ariel, you gave us a whole PSA. You were like, pay that $25 to get to the courthouse.
Exactly.
I think that's
very lazy. And in the end, I think it doesn't matter how the parents fell out. Kids benefit if both parents can be in their life positively.
Yeah.
I'm not saying to have someone around who's, doing the worst, but if two positive parents can stay in a child's life, even after separating, the statistics are just different for that child. And that's what it's supposed to be about. You're supposed to want better for your kids. My time's going to end. Yeah. My only job is to make sure they turn out to be good people. So I need to do whatever I can and put as many people in their path that gives them the best odds to be good people.
Yeah.
That's all I can do.
I love that.
I agree.
Well,
Yes.
I thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories. I really hope, this is a show that centers Black women.
Yes.
Each week I have an elder, a younger, and me, but I welcome Black men, and really all men, everybody. Right. We censor Black women. We're not exclusively for Black women. I think there's something to be learned from these conversations, and I truly hope fathers hear what you both shared, because what we want to say to you men is you are needed. We need our fathers. You have such an important role to play in our lives and determine how we interact with other men, how we interact with platonic friendships. Right. But like I said, the most important role is how we interact with ourselves, and our relationship with our parents, both mother and father, play a significant role. So I want to salute all the dads, biological or otherwise, who are out there doing the damn thing, handling your business. We see you, we honor you, and thank you for that. And for those of you who are not, it is never too late. If you have been absent for weeks or years or decades, pick up the phone, make that call, do the outreach, find your children, and build that relationship, and stand firm and strong when your kids have to confront you with the absentee challenges they've had.
Yes.
In your absence, they have gone through things. And so you have to be prepared to say that, face that, receive it. But there is joy on the other side of that. So thank you all for tuning into this episode of Across Generations. I thank my guests for being so transparent in your stories. And I thank you all for letting me tell all my business yet again on this episode. And we'll see you next time.